Okay, everybody, so we are here today to talk about the layout for the on-point version of our sampler bouquet quilt and just the general assembly. So as you can see here, they give you the layout of the quilt. Now obviously you can pick and choose where you want to lay your blocks. So you're going to have 12 of the sampler blocks in total. Sorry. And you're going to have several butterfly blocks, several different butterfly blocks for your layout. So you are going to need to watch the way they turn. So for instance, I have 3 butterfly blocks down here that are going upwards, and at the top of the quilt you can see I also have the same design, but my half square triangle is cut in the opposite direction to fit the on point. Same thing over here. I have 4 butterfly blocks facing inward to the right, and I have 4 butterfly blocks facing inward to the left. I also have 4 non-printed butterfly blocks. They're part of the butterfly blocks design file that you get during month 1, but you just have 4 of these cornerstone blocks to square off the quilt. And then I believe, is it 16 or 20? My brain is not braining right now. 4, 8, 12, 16, it's 20. Okay, and you are going to have 20 of these. So you're going to have 3 of these, 3 of the top version, 4 of each side version, 4 cornerstones, and 20 butterfly blocks. And you are going to lay your quilts out. If you have a nice open space, like I've laid mine out here on our kookaburra, and I've got it sewn together in sections. So we're going to talk about how we do these sections. So I'm going to flip the instructions over to the next page, and we're going to look at this right here. So we have section A, section B, section C, and section D. So you are assembling 4 different sections. So section A, B, C, and D. So let's look at each section real quick. So right here at the bottom, I've not completely sewn this together because I want to show you how I put the rows together. But right here and right here, this is section C. Section C, and then right above it, in a similar fashion, is section A. Right here is section A, and this is section B, and that is section D. Again, you can arrange the blocks whatever your fancy is. I just laid mine out as the ones were on the cover page just because it was easy, because I could follow the picture. So I just laid everything out as it went. Now, in your instructions, it's going to give you the assembly for each section. So there will be a row 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in section A. And then when we get to section B and section D, there are only going to be 4 rows. They're a little bit smaller than section A and C. But when we get to section C, we have 4 rows again. I'm sorry, 5 rows again. And when we get to section D, we only have 4 again. So you can see how it kind of breaks it out into quadrants. What I actually did was, where this is, I took 2 yardsticks and I laid them in between it so I wouldn't get the sections mixed up. So I had kind of like yardsticks creating a perimeter around my sections. Now, how are we going to assemble our sections into larger sections? So what we're going to do, if we flip over to the next page, is we are going to assemble the sections to each other. So we're going to take section A and B and assemble them, and we're going to take section C and D and assemble them. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take section A and B. I'm going to flip B over onto A, and I'm going to line them up, and I'm going to stitch them down. And then I'm going to repeat the same process with the other 2 sections, and then I'm going to open them back up and then assemble them to one another. I hope that makes sense. I really don't know how else to describe it. But here on the back side, we'll show the sections being assembled to one another. And then when you're done, you have your fully finished quilt. So let's talk about laying the rows out. So if you watched the video, if you haven't, I would recommend it, going and back and watching the video of how to put the 4 patches together, because I talk about how to pin your blocks together to where you're getting on the outside corner. We're about to go over just a little bit of that and talk about pressing. So you're going to put each block to the respected block that your instructions lay out for you. So it's basically going to go butterfly, block, butterfly, block. And you're going to just put them together in rows. Like this is the first row, this is the second row, this is the third row, this is the fourth row, and I'm about to do the 5th row. So I've assembled all the blocks together, and we're going to talk about how to put the rows together, because it's the same principle for the rest of it for the biggest part of the assembly. So I'm going to just flip this over on to the bigger part of my piece, and I'm going to move my camera over to where hopefully you guys can see me. Okay. I'm going to grab my little bag of pins, and we're going to talk about how we're going to pin this to get this to go together really nice and smoothly. So what I like to do with my blocks is I like to go to the furthest outside seam point, just in the very far corner, put my needle through it, and then I take the next block and where the furthest outside seam corner is, and I put my needle through it. And I'm going to just kind of push those in together, smooth them out, turn my needle back, or my pin, whatever you want to call it, and then I'm going to make sure that it is in the outermost line, and when I flip it through, it is in the outermost line. And that's going to help keep it straight. So I like to do that in my blocks for all of my pinning. Anytime I'm lining a block up, that's where I like to be. Now, as I go down, where my seams have been pressed open, we are going to take and we're going to line those open seams up with one another. So we're going to find right where that pressed open seam is. Let me pull my camera up. So right here where the pressed open seam is on either side, and we're going to try our best to align those just perfectly. And I'm going to put my pin where it's pressed open, and on the other side where it's pressed open, I'm going to put my other pin in. And that is going to help keep them nice and open as I sew. And I'm going to repeat that process real quick down the line, just real fast. Good deal. Bear with me while I get this pinned real quick. I'm just repeating the process I just told you about all the way down the length. Okay, here we go. Alrighty. I got one that didn't want to cooperate. Now, when I get to this outside corner and where this corner meet, what I have to do is I take and I look for my open seam, and where that seam opening is, right here, where that seam opening is, and my outside corner right here, where that little stitch line right there, I'm trying to match this open seam to that corner. So I'm going to take and put my pin through that, and then through this outside corner right here. I'm trying to move my camera. And we're going to slide those into one another. And then we're going to pin. And I'm going to try to keep it pinned open as best as I can. Now, that may not be a lot of pins, and I worry about slippage. So like what I like to do is I like to go once or twice. That pin is bent, so we're not going to use it. I'm going to go through my little areas right here from block to block, and I'm going to go through the furthest outermost stitch line right here, and I'm going to do the same thing through the back side. So I'm going to weave that through the outermost stitch line on this side, and then come through to the outermost stitch line on the other side and weave it back through both. And I usually put about 2 pins per block through the outermost stitch line as best as I can. That's just going to keep it from slipping on me as I sew through. Now, while we're pinning, I want to talk to you about what I'm sewing this with. So this is a lot of fabric. This is a lot of batting. There's some stabilizer in here. So it's a little coarse. So I have in a 90-14 needle, which is a little thicker than standard. If you are struggling, if you have a needle break, you may even want to change to a 16 gauge. And I would very highly recommend using a walking foot as you sew these rows together. I hope that makes sense. The walking foot is going to grab the top and the bottom of your fabric at the same time and make it easier to feed through. So we are just finishing up pinning right here. Okay. So now that I have this all nice and pinned, my rows and my blocks should roughly line up with each other. I always like to flip it open to make sure that everything is going in the correct direction. Now I'm going to lay it back smooth, and I've got my walking foot on, I've got my 9014 needle in, and I'm going to stitch this out. So bear with me as I move my camera over, and we're going to talk about where we're going to sew. So when you're sewing any portion of this, you are going to be trying to stitch just to the inside of the furthest outmost seam line. That helps hide all those outside stitches that we did for basting. So there's that basting stitch that it did. Now, if you are a Vanish Light user and you've already washed it out, just keep your raw edges even with one another and sew roughly 1/4 of an inch. Ooh. Hit my camera, I'm sorry. So we are going to keep all of our seams open that are open as best we can, and we are going to go nice and slow because this is thick, and when we go through some of these bulkier seams, it likes to catch. And please do not sew through your pins. If you are like me and you watched my video on how to put the 4 patches together, you may have seen that I hit a pin even though I thought I took them all out. Joke's on me, I didn't. Okay, so we're going to go nice and slow through all of that bulk. So where the seam initially is at the edge is a little heavy and difficult to get through, so just go slow. You don't want to break a needle. Just go slow, take your time. You kind of have to just get it over that initial bulky seam. And bear with me, I'm just trying to reposition as I move forward and get my pins in a spot that I'm not going to stab myself. So I'm just sewing to that inside seam, and I'm pulling my pins out as I go. If you notice, I just pulled my pin out when I got my fabric just underneath it, because I want that foot to hold that bulk of that fabric down so my seams do not flip on me. See, they're still open. They didn't get flipped over on me. And we're going to just keep on going down. It's not as bad when you're sewing down where the big heavy seams are. So we're just going to keep on sewing, keep on sewing. My fabric was flipped because of my pin, so I'm just going to take that one out real quick. But just watch and see, just be careful not to get your fabrics flipped. It's not like you need to take it out if it is. It's just going to reduce bulk, which I'm a big fan of. We want to reduce all that bulk that we can. Okay, here we go. Let's pull that out. And then I've been back stitching just kind of at the beginning and the end. Okay, that's all you've got to do. So we're going to cut our threads, and we are going to now take this and press the seam open. So if you may have watched the 4-patch layout video, if you didn't, you know, if you're doing it, cool. But I do go into a little more depth about putting the blocks together, so you may want to check that one out. That is entirely at your discretion. But I'm going to show just one more time how I press the seams open in case you didn't catch that one. So what I like to do, because I have stabilizer on the back, is I like to use a pressing sheet. This is an Angelina sheet. I've used them for years. They're not super thick, they're not super big, they're perfect to lay my iron on top of, and it protects my iron from my stabilizer and my stabilizer from my iron. So anytime you've got interfacing or stabilizer on the back of something, I could not recommend the Angelina sheet more. It is great. So I'm just going to kind of roughly finger press this open just to get the split open for me. And then I'm going to put my Angelina sheet on top of it, or whatever your preferred pressing sheet is. And I'm just going to lay it on top of it. And as I move forward, I'm just going to press my seam open with my fingers a little bit. And I'm just going to move my iron up to where I'm making sure it's always on my pressing sheet. I do not want my iron to touch my fabric, and I do not want my fabric to touch my iron. And then we'll just reposition and we'll go all the way down, just pressing our seams open like I have here. And then you will have your sections. So you just have to pin your sections to your other sections and put them together. Now, the instructions are very clear and concise. I just wanted to give you some tips on how to keep everything nice and linear with each other and show you the initial layout. So we are going to come back at some point here in a little while to talk about roughly how we're going to quilt each version of the quilt. We probably won't do like a complete video, but we will talk about how we've got it assembled and give you some tips and tricks and some ideas for quilting your layouts, both the 4-patch and the on point. So keep a lookout for that. We'll have that posted as soon as possible. Happy sewing, guys. Until next time. Bye-bye.